Steve King, and I represent Iowa's 4th Congressional District, and I've had the privilege of representing Iowans in Congress since January of 2003, and I've long taken a leading position on the pro-life cause, and I'm very grateful for all the Iowans that have stepped up on this cause. And I don't think anybody doubts about my convictions. I happen to also be the author of the Heartbeat Bill at the national level, and I want to give you a little piece of that narrative because at the funeral of Phyllis Schlafly in September of 2016, I went to the back of the church, and she was a terrific friend, a living, breathing icon in her time, and we had a tremendous relationship. But I so lamented her loss, and I just wanted to go to the back of the church and just pray and reflect upon all her contributions of her life. And as I'm in the back of the church, about 30 minutes before the funeral began, they came and took me by the wrist and led me up to the front, which is a biblical thing to happen. You don't want to be led to the back. It's much better to be led to the front. And there, ahead of me, were the Trumps and David Bossie, Kellyanne Conway, and Steve Bannon to attend the funeral as well. And so there in that second pew, I made a commitment that I would draft a heartbeat bill and that I would do all due diligence to put the language together and drive it with all of the tools available to me. More or less a commitment to Phyllis's memory, and also a commitment to the cause that I've been working on for a long time. I spent about 4 months drafting that bill and introduced it in the early part of the previous Congress, so January or early February of 2017. I didn't allow for exceptions for rape and incest out of conviction and out of reflection to the convictions of the pro-life communities, and there are multiple pro-life communities that I have worked with for years. And so it wasn't any question about, well, should we or shouldn't we write it into the bill. It was what's right and what's wrong, the right part, right thing, the right policy will be written into the bill. And we evaluated the legal arguments, the Supreme Court decisions of Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton, and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, configured the legislation so it would be a direct challenge to the Supreme Court's decision in Roe versus Wade in '73. As I brought that bill then, drafted, I think, very well and very succinctly into the United States House of Representatives, we started to pick up co-sponsors pretty quickly. And we had to work it, but we got to 162 co-sponsors, and I hit this plateau where I wasn't making any more progress, and I thought, we've got to put something on the scoreboard. We can't let this work go for naught. And so I called up State Senator Jason Schultz, and I said, Senator, and he's my senator, is there room and a path for a heartbeat bill in Iowa, in the Iowa legislature? And his long professional answer that said he had it all analyzed in his head before I asked him the question came down to one word: yes, there was room. And so I took the bill that we had, we configured it for the state, passed it through Jason Schultz, he took it to the bill drafters here, we kicked it back and forth a few times, and in the end, I wrote the last edits into that bill for the Iowa heartbeat bill. And so that's the description about how one ends up with the authorship, or at least part of authorship in the bill. We didn't just leave it go at that. We went to work to push the bill through the state legislature. And the state Senate moved it through quickly. I want to thank the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Brad Zahn, whom I spoke with earlier today, and he would like to be here, he pushed it through the Judiciary Committee in almost no time. They took it to the floor, and State Senator Amy Sinclair went and debated that thing on the floor and passed the heartbeat bill off of the floor in 24 minutes of debate. An amazing accomplishment. More like 7 weeks, though, to get it through the Iowa House. And we got up to 48 votes there, and we had been strategizing the whip count on that a lot of different ways. But in the end, we started with 35 easy co-sponsors, or yes votes on the whip card, and we struggled to get to 48. We were kind of bogged out there, and we needed 3 more to get it through the House. That happened on the weekend that we had our 4th District Convention, and the following Monday they brought it to the floor of the House, passed the heartbeat bill, which by the way says if a heartbeat can be detected, the baby is protected. And so it went to Governor Reynolds' desk. I was in Washington voting the day that she signed the bill, but I called her about 15 or 20 minutes before the press conference. I wanted to encourage her to use the best positive attitude possible, and I said, own it. Just own it, because this is great, and it's great for the children, and it sends a message to America. She signed that bill, and at that moment, Iowa was the #1 pro-life state in the Union. And then, of course, we went through the court battles that we went through. But it started an epidemic in heartbeat bills. And back up now to the U.S. House. I got to 174 co-sponsors without exceptions. And I had a promise, a lockdown promise, we would do a markup in the Judiciary Committee. And then it was my job then to address bringing it to the floor. Well, this thing got, we call it sometimes slow walked, where you don't get a date set up for a markup in committee. We had a hearing. In fact, at the hearing, we had the youngest witness ever to testify before the United States Congress. 18 weeks of gestation, let's see, I think I forget. Lincoln Glenn Miller, and was his name. And we put him up on ultrasound and a screen on the wall, and I asked him to suck his thumb, and he did. I'd already seen the film. And I asked him to move his arm, and he did. And try to talk to us now, and his lips moved, and he was a powerful witness, maybe the most powerful. I know he was the youngest. And so we pushed this thing and did the right things, and the heartbeat bill touches people's hearts across America. But we weren't able to get that markup in Judiciary Committee. The establishment wing of the Republican Party killed the bill in the last weeks of our lame duck session. And finally, instead of giving me we'll maybe look at that later conversation, it was, you're not going to get a markup. Without explanation, without an argument of any kind, that just came down from on high. So that's part of friction that you see within the party. And what I see is almost all of the Republican Party is pro-life. And those who are pro-life by conviction understand that exceptions are wrong, that every life is precious, that no matter what the circumstances of or how they came to be, every life is precious. And I stand on that principle, and I wasn't about to compromise on that principle in the United States Congress. Had we brought that bill before the Judiciary Committee, we had the votes to peel off any amendment, and we had the votes on the floor to pass the bill. We could have set that on Mitch McConnell's desk and said to America, all human life is sacred, and from conception till natural death, but the first certain determination of life is a heartbeat. So this came about when I gave a speech before the West Des Moines Conservative Breakfast a week ago Wednesday, and the misinformation abounded across the countryside. You all in here know this issue that know me, know what happened. It was a misquote. That misquote was retracted, and it was replaced with an accurate quote, but that didn't stop the epidemic around America. And I don't want people to be confused about where the Republican Party stands or where the pro-life movement in America stands. This country is more pro-life today than it was a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's moving more and more in the pro-life direction. And we're going to have to answer this question of exceptions. The exceptions are those that are promoted by the establishment wing of the party that I believe are not philosophical pro-life. They are made a political calculation that they need to be for political purposes. We know this, that no matter how they came to be, no matter the circumstances of conception, every life is sacred from the moment of conception until natural death. I liked what Governor Bob Casey of Pennsylvania had to say, and he's the father, passed away now, of Senator Casey. He said, human life cannot be measured. It is the measure itself against which all other things are weighed. And so, then we'll add one more point here, and then I'll start the introductions. But it's important to know also that Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, making an argument against my position, said that he supports the position of the platform and argued that the platform contains exceptions, and it does not. The national platform, it's implicit that there are not exceptions in it. There's certainly not specific that there are. It's implicit that are not exceptions. And I'm going to read you the provision in the Iowa platform, which is, let's see, it is, I think I underlined it here. Yes, the Iowa platform says, we move, the Iowa Republican Party aggressively support a life begins its conception bill without exceptions. It's specific in the Iowa platform. It's more implied in the federal platform, but let's not have any confusion about this. And so when we get a heartbeat bill to the United States Supreme Court, and everyone should know that there's going to be no lower court that's going to uphold any heartbeat bill because they're not going to go up against the Supreme Court in Roe versus Wade. We have to appeal it all the way to the Supreme Court, and then they have to take a new look at this. So it's important that we not have exceptions in a bill, because when it goes before the Supreme Court, they're going to say, well, the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law. And that equal protection, if equal protection can rationalize all kinds of things, they're going to look at that and say, your bill may well be unconstitutional, because why would you exempt someone from equal protection under the law because of how they came to be? So this is an important legal point. It's an important theological point. It's an important point for all people here, that those who are conceived under different circumstances are every bit as precious as the rest of us. And we have with us with Rebecca Kiessling, who is the president of Save the One. She has an organization, a nationwide organization, a powerful personality of her own right, and I'd like to welcome Rebecca Kiessling.
Thank you. I'm Rebecca Kiessling. I'm from Michigan, and I am the president and founder of Save the One, which is a global pro-life organization with a network of almost 900 of us now who were conceived and raped like me, and mothers who became pregnant by rape. And the majority are mothers who are raising their children, and then we have birth mothers who became pregnant by rape, as well as post-abortive women who regret aborting after rape, and women who regret their miscarriage after having been raped. We specialize in defending all of the so-called hard cases through in the abortion debate through our personal stories. But however, we resent being called a hard case, because if you know any of us, you would realize that we're not hard cases as people with our humanity. It's really all of the people who make the exceptions, who discriminate, who are the hard cases, because they have the hardened hearts. My personal story is that I was conceived when my birth mother was abducted at knife point by a serial rapist. She went to 2 different illegal back alley abortions exactly 4 years prior to Roe versus Wade. And the back alley conditions and the fact that it was illegal caused her to back out, as it did with most women. She was pro-choice when we met, even though she was very happy to meet me. I was 19 when we met, and she told me that if abortion had been legal, she would have aborted me. And so I literally owe my birth to legislators who protected me. They are my heroes, and I owe my birth to them. I know what it's like to be attacked for my position. I've been speaking for 24 years. I've been an attorney for 24 years. I put myself out there knowing that I'll be ridiculed. But I do it for others because I'm safe. You know, the most selfish thing would be to just live my life and say, well, at least I was born, too bad for the rest. I can't do that. And it's out of gratitude for my life being spared and protected that I seek to do the same for others who are just as worthy of love and life as I was. And I had a photo that I posted in June of me with my 3 daughters at an event, and we're holding our pink signs from Save the One. And mine says, conceived in rape, I love my life. And my daughter's signs each say, my mom was conceived in rape, I love our lives. And there were about 4,000 pro-choice activists who descended upon my Facebook page to accuse me of being a rape apologist, saying that I'm pro-rape because I love my life, and telling me that if I cared for my birth mother at all, I would have killed myself a long time ago. This is the kind of ridicule that I face, and I see that this is exactly the same kind of thing that's happening to Congressman King. Because the headlines, first of all, I get Google alerts every day for anything related to this issue. Conceived in rape, product rape, pregnant by rape, accepting cases of rape, rape exception. And so I've seen all the headlines in the last week and a half. And I see what's being said. And just like I get accused of somehow promoting rape because I have the audacity to value my life, this is the same thing that is being assigned to the congressman. That somehow, because he values the lives of children conceived in rape, they're suggesting now that he's defending rape. Because he acknowledges that there was rape in history. Somehow now you're suggesting that he's defending rape. That is absurd. Absolutely absurd. And I tell people, look, you can be pro-law enforcement and not be pro-crime, even though it's true that if it weren't for crime, there'd be no law enforcement. That's how they're acting with my story. That, well, you're pro-rape then, because if your mother hadn't been raped, you wouldn't be here today. No one's arguing for a right to be created. What we're defending is that once you've been created, once you're alive and in existence, you have a right not to be killed. And that right is secured in our Constitution, where it says that no state shall deprive a person of the right to life, and that no person shall be denied equal protection. And no state shall deny a person equal protection. And when you add rape exceptions, that's what you're doing. You're denying equal protection. And you're saying that we're subhuman, that somehow we're not a person because of how we're conceived. And I know that what Congressman King was doing in his statements was empathizing with my people group. He was trying to put himself in our shoes and say that he can empathize and that he can't say that he's any better than any of us, that his DNA is no more pure than any of us. And that's true for every single one of you. If any of you, one of you want to stand up and argue now that somehow that you're worth life more than me, go for it. Go ahead and explain to me, well, you're more worthy of life than I am. Well, you're somehow superior to me and my people group because of how you were conceived. I deserve the equal protection that I received. It was actually in Des Moines, Iowa, that I was able to change the heart of Governor Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich during their presidential campaigns. I'm in the Citizens United film, The Gift of Life, with Governor Mike Huckabee. So I had backstage passes, and I introduced myself to each, shared my story, and told them that I'm in the film and that I was the national spokeswoman for Personhood. And Bachman and Santorum had signed the Personhood pledge, but Perry and Gingrich had not, because they were both avowed to be rape exception candidates. And I had one-on-one personal conversations with them. And to my face that night, Governor Perry told me, promised me no more rape exceptions. And he went on national television and told everybody that he could not look me in the eyes and justify the rape exception any longer. He said that he had never put a face to the issue before. And that's the real problem in America, that people aren't putting a face to this issue. You just throw it around like it's some kind of political game. And you throw out these headlines like it's a freaking joke. It's not. You're talking about real people, about our lives, and you're so callous and flippant. And I am so grateful that there are others who are willing to put themselves out there when they don't have a personal stake in it like I do. Congressman Steve King has been the most pro-life congressman, legislator in D.C. I am so grateful for his leadership. The Heartbeat Bill has more co-sponsors than any other piece of pro-life legislation. And yet, inexplicably, it can't even get to a vote. exceptions. When I was up there for the hearing a couple of years ago, we chatted about this, and he told me why he's so passionate about making sure that there's no exceptions in it. And I know that he's heard the rhetoric of how I've been ridiculed. Like, for example, Sean Hannity. 9 months after we met backstage at a Citizens United film at the RNC convention, he was interviewing my friend Lila Rose, pro-life leader from Live Action, on his radio program. And he said, "I just think that's an evil seed." Evil seed. And then he goes on to explain it. Doesn't the Bible say that the sins of the father will be passed on to the child for the 3rd and 4th generation or something like that? And actually it says that you're not to punish the child for the sins of the father. And it's this kind of rhetoric where we get called things like evil seed, demon seed, tainting the gene pool, horrible reminder, rapist child. You never hear people call me a rape victim's child. And so reporters, please, today, do not call me a rapist child. I do not want to see that I'm the child of a rapist. He has no right to me whatsoever. I championed the Rape Survivor Child Custody Act with others who were conceived and raped, mothers from rape. Congressman voted for the federal bill that gives states like Iowa an incentive to get this bill passed to terminate the parental rights of rapists, because the child is not the rapist child, and he should have no say to this child whatsoever. And it got passed here unanimously when it was not going anywhere. It was dead because the Democrats and Republicans wouldn't support each other's bills. I came here and lobbied for this bill, and we got it passed unanimously. So Iowa is a state that does not require a rape conviction, but it uses the clear and convincing evidence standard, because that child is the rape victim's child, and they deserve to be protected. We should punish rapists, not babies. And according to the United States Supreme Court, in the case of Coker versus Georgia, they said that rapists don't deserve the death penalty. And in the subsequent case of Kennedy v. Louisiana, the U.S. Supreme Court said that even for child molesters, it is cruel and unusual punishment. So then how do I, as the innocent child, deserve the death penalty? How does my people group deserve the death penalty for his crime? For all those people who are out there advocating for abortion in cases of rape, or especially in cases of rape, let me ask you, do you ever see anybody advocate for a woman to be able to pay someone to kill her rapist? Never. Only advocating to pay someone to kill her innocent child. And that is absolutely barbaric. In a civilized society, we do not do that. We do not punish innocent people for someone else's crime. And that's exactly what the Congressman said in his statement, that the child does not deserve to die for the sins of the father. And I appreciate how he defended us vigorously and how he showed empathy for our people group. And he has had our back defending us, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today and to have your back. You know, if we want politicians to carry the water for us, then we ought to be there for them when they're under attack and when their words are being twisted. Thank you so much.
And now I'd like to introduce Tammy Kobza, Phyllis Schlafly, Eagles for Iowa, and she's given a terrific addition to our cause here today. I really appreciate you, Tammy.
I really don't want to follow Rebecca. Yes, I'm with Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and I live here in Iowa. And Phyllis Schlafly was the defender of life in a way that makes it, that we have it in our Republican platform. We have the issue of life in that platform, and she has been a longtime friend of Congressman King. And I'm just here as a grassroots person in Iowa saying that I'm speaking with people across the state, and they are grateful for the leadership and the core principles of Congressman Steve King. And the 4th District, the district he represents, people are so grateful for him. And people across the state are wishing they could vote for him. That is what happens when courageous men stand up in very hard times and defend people that were not maybe conceived under the best of circumstances, but we all know that their life is worthy in the sight of God, and it should be in the sight of a civilized society, as Rebecca said. So we appreciate you coming out today, and just a shout out to the media. We hope that everything is accurately reported this time. Thank you.
Now we have Tim Overlin as Executive Director of Personhood, Iowa. He's done a lot of good pro-life work here in the state of Iowa. Tim?
So as the Congressman said, I'm the Executive Director of Personhood, Iowa. Our organization was actually created because we didn't feel that this issue was being championed as it should. Too many times the expedient thing was done for political reasons. So 4 or 5 years ago, Personhood Iowa came into existence, and we felt like we were trying to hold the lines. And I'll give you a perfect example. Earlier this week in Tennessee, a state that's similarly set up as we are, with majorities in both chambers, as well as a Republican governor. We heard about the party platform. I helped write that a few years ago, and we really brought that to that point where there was no exceptions. Life begins at conception. They have a majority in Tennessee where they are pushing for life at conception. Basically, they took the heartbeat bill and have ran with it. And we had the general counsel of a national, they call themselves a pro-life group, testifying against that bill. And I guess that's the reason that groups like Personhood Iowa, the National Personhood Alliance, and those type of groups are out there, is because they're out there arguing against actual pro-life legislation and safe babies. And there's video out there. You guys can go find that video and watch the entire video as well. So so the main reason I'm here is to support actually one of our champions, one of the guys that has gone to the wall, whether it's against the national groups, whether it's against his own leadership. He's had our backs here as he laid out. He helped fight for the heartbeat legislation here. And while we don't normally support personhood or heartbeat legislation on its surface, we did everything we could to help support as long as there was no exceptions in that bill. And we pushed and fought, helped bring people like Rebecca and other folks here to help lobby for that legislation. And so the reason that I'm here personally is because, as Rebecca said, Steve King has had our back on the life issue. And again, as Rebecca said, if we're not going to back them up, then I don't know how we can expect them to keep fighting against the folks in and outside of the party. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Tim. And next up is Tamara Scott, who is a host of Truth for Our Time and has a few other hats to wear, but Tamara is just terrific, and I'm looking forward to what she has to say.
Thank you all. I do wear many, many hats. One is the host of Truth for Our Time, where I get to meet incredible people and hear sometimes heart-wrenching stories. One was from Judah Meyer, who was conceived in a gang rape of 8 men. Thankful her mother didn't give her the death sentence for her crimes of her father, she now helps others who find themselves pregnant as victims of rape and incest. And she will tell you, even with the younger victims, with the hardship of a delivery is not nearly as damaging and impactful as the drugging they endured while being trafficked, or the psychological damage of years of incest. She's now helping these individuals that they don't add one more weight of depression in creating another victim through abortion. And she has on her Facebook a photo, a poster of many faces, hundreds. And Rebecca, I think you have in your organization a list of hundreds of individuals as well who have been conceived, people you would know who have been conceived in rape or who have been raped or a victim of incest and allowed that baby to have life. Christy Hockerberg was conceived in incest. Her mother endured 20 years of abuse, rape by her own father. 4 abortions covered that up. A 5th baby was killed in the womb at the hands of her father. So her mother hid Christy's pregnancy. She was allowed to deliver. She never got to see Christy once she did. When Christy learned her fate, she knew she had to speak out to help other individuals who have also suffered the same fate, that there would not be more innocent lives snuffed out before they had their first breath. I talked to a manager of an abortion clinic in Congressman King's district just yesterday. I asked, does Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics cover up these crimes? She said, oh, absolutely. Don't ask, don't tell is alive and well in the abortion industry. When a young girl comes in and has 3 to 4 terminations before she's 18 years old, you know something's usually up. And so here's what we're allowing when we silence people like Congressman King, because they're listening to the hard discussion that he's trying to have. Crimes go unpunished, or crimes go unnoticed, criminals go unpunished, predators run free, women and children remain in danger as evidence of rape and incest is destroyed in the death of an innocent child, further victimizing young girls and women emotionally for years long after the crime has stopped. The media and lawmakers have it within their means to put an end to this tragedy. But instead, they choose to go after the one man who is. They could correct the situation, and instead they attack the one who is standing. A man who's dedicated his life to saving the lives of others he doesn't even know. At the risk of his own career. I can't think of a greater love than he who lays down his own life for that of his brother. And I can think of no greater act of compassion than one willing to stand against the distorted attacks of others to defend lives of babies that are yet to be born. Innocent lives, whether they're targeted in minority neighborhoods, like Planned Parenthood, or those who are conceived in rape and incest. Congressman King is correct to ask the question, how many good people are missing? How many great accomplishments and contributions will we never see? Because what has been stolen from mankind. I ask you this, if the creator of life deemed that in the tragedy of incest or the violence of rape, when he's promised us in Genesis 50:20 that he can turn harm, what those mean for harm, into good, who are we to say you misunderstood and override him? Lives like Rebecca, precious, full of potential. Honest discussion needs to be had, but it doesn't usually take place in a well-packaged soundbite. It can be messy. It can sound harsh. But without having those discussions, we don't find solutions. It is courageous to have someone who is willing to tackle these topics in the face of ridicule as others continually come after him. I am not getting involved in any primary. In my other hats, I won't. But I would hope anybody in office, as has been said here today, that's going to stand for life can understand and expect the rest of us to step up and defend them when wrong is done. And when 2 major news sources have the courage to retract a statement because they followed the error printing and bias reporting of another, shouldn't we all stand up? Because I don't know about you, I'm tired of seeing good men and women destroyed because someone else doesn't like their views. These things are difficult to talk about, but it's not hateful to want to help. I can think of no one more courageous than one willing to stand and face the ridicule of undeserved disdain as his words are distorted and used against him. And that is why I stand here today with Iowa's only pro-life House member, our only voice for the unborn, and one of the few men I know willing to put the best interests of others that he doesn't even know ahead of himself.
Thank you, Tamara. And Rebecca has a little more she'd like to add here, some local statements that she has gathered here in the state of Iowa. Rebecca?
As I said, we have a network of over 900, and so there were two women from Iowa who wanted to be able to be here today, and they wrote out statements for me to read on behalf of Congressman. Peggy Jenkins is a Save the One pro-life speaker who resides in Comanche, Iowa. She's the former executive director of the Pregnancy Center in Clinton and is grateful for Congressman King's defense of those conceived and raped. She always considered herself to be pro-life, but was once privately on the fence about cases of rape and incest. That is, until she discovered the truth about herself. And she's written a book about her story entitled Always Good Enough. Peggy writes this in support of a congressman. As a nurse, I was on the fence with exceptions because I wanted to be sympathetic to the victim of rape or incest. But then I learned from my maternal half-sister that our mother had been raped. And so I had been pro-life with exceptions for rape and incest until I met myself. This was a turning point in my pro-life advocacy. The reality of my own conception made me take a hard look at the issue, and I remember shaking my head thinking, why would the way a person is conceived have any impact on a baby's right to life? We should not punish the child for the sin of the father. I look at my grandchildren and realize that none of them would be here if I'd been aborted, if I'd been killed. We need to all get to a place where we can put ourselves in the position of the most vulnerable and most targeted. Children conceived in rape or incest, which is what Congressman Steve King was clearly trying to do. It is compassionate to want to relate to the child conceived in rape and say, I'm no different. I wish everyone could recognize that all human life has value and there should be no exception, no compromise, ever. I appreciate Congressman Steve King's consistent support of those of us who were conceived in rape or incest and for having the courage to take a stand on an issue that has become so political and divisive. I truly am appalled at the level of flippancy involved, especially with the media, when we are talking about the life of a child, an innocent baby who has no voice. Congressman King is correct in saying that it is morally wrong to suggest that the way a child is conceived should determine whether they live or die. They should not pay for the sins of the father. And then the second story is also from Save the One, Trisha Boss from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And she shares her story in support of Congressman King. Let me just say that my story is unique, as I gave birth to a child who was conceived by incest. My brother's child. I was surviving a horrible childhood. When my daughter was born, I was allowed to see her. I wasn't even allowed to watch the birth at all. However, on the third day that I was in the hospital, a nurse angel popped her head in the door of my room and asked me if I wanted to hold my baby. I almost said no, as I knew I wasn't allowed to see her, but I said yes. I was able to hold her for half an hour. She was perfect. That was October of 1975. I didn't see her again until 1994. What a day that was. I have no photos of her while in the hospital, but I have this photo of her at 3 months old when the adoption became final. I received it years later from the adoption agency when I requested information, and perhaps you can imagine how precious it is to me. I understand that people want to reduce a woman's pain after she has gotten pregnant through rape or incest by allowing abortions. I get that. When talking with my birth mother, it is very painful for me. With my birth daughter, it is very painful for me and always a reminder of what I went through during my childhood years. But I would rather suffer that pain than deal with the pain of taking the lives of 2 innocent children. You see, I also later had 2 abortions during my marriage. Those are decisions I have regretted for many years. As for those 2 babies we lost, they were each a decision between me and my husband on the advice of a minister who we trusted for wise counsel on our financial and marriage issues. With the first one, I was put to sleep, so I had no idea what was going on. With the second one, I was awake, fully awake and aware. I was devastated afterward for insisting on another abortion. We both deeply regret those decisions, and we both wonder about the 2 children who we lost. Back in the day, there wasn't much information about abortion, nor was there much education on what happened during an abortion. Congressman King, thank you for speaking up about abortion and your willingness to protect those conceived in rape or incest, as well as the mothers like me. So those are the 2 stories from Save the One. I published something on my blog a couple of days ago. It's SaveTheOne.com, and that's the number 1, not the word 1. So if you go to SaveTheOne.com to the blog, it's the first blog posted, and it has a statement from me, and it has these 2 statements in it. So if you want to get the exact quote and their name, then you'll have that there. I also want to tell one more story. On my website, on Save the One, I have a list of famous people conceived in rape. Jesse Jackson was conceived in rape. His mother was 14. She was babysitting, raped by a neighbor. Eartha Kitt sang Santa Baby. She was conceived in rape. Ethel Waters was conceived in rape. John Cox, who ran for president before, and he ran for governor of California recently, was conceived in rape. The 7-time world champion surfer, she was conceived in rape. I can't remember her name offhand. Thaddeus Bullard, who was Titus O'Neil in the WWF. He's a great humanitarian, has a wonderful TED Talk that he's done. I think his mother was 12 or 13 when she was raped. He has a very powerful story, as I said, great humanitarian. And Jake the Snake from the WWF, he also happened to be conceived in rape. And then there's also Frederick Douglass, perhaps the greatest, most well-known abolitionist. He did extensive writing, got into politics, and he's an American hero. He was conceived 10 years after the embargo on slavery. And that's when many slave owners began raping their slaves in order to perpetuate slavery. Valuing his life, referring to his story and history, again, does not mean I'm justifying rape. Just to be clear, does not make me pro-rape. And I think that it's interesting to consider how today's abortion lobby back then would have offered his mother an abortion. That would have been the solution, offer her an abortion. Instead of protecting his life and delivering them out of that abusive situation. I ask people, defend the weak, defend the most vulnerable. vulnerable. Defend the mothers and their children. Punish the rapists, not the babies. And please stop stigmatizing my people group. If you take a look, I promise you, there are no horns. Okay? No horns, and there's no tail. I was innocent. I plead my innocence. And I ask you to defend life, equal protection, stop the stigmatization. Thank you.
As I'm standing here listening, it comes to mind in the book of Ezekiel. It says that the son shall not be put to death for the sins of the father, neither the father put to death for the sins of the son. And so that statement that you brought is held up by Scripture. And I wanted to just conclude the thoughts on this right before we go to questions. And if I were going to put this all in one succinct statement, I would deliver it this way. Thou shalt not execute the baby for the sins of the father. Thus saith the Lord and the Republican Party. And we're going to stand on that principle until such time as we achieve. We're going to always stand on that principle. We're going to achieve this in law one day together. And there will be a big celebration for life. And every time we have this debate, lives are saved because people then come back and they think about, what does this really mean? What's the value of life? It isn't just the vote, it isn't just the law, but the debate saves lives too because it causes people to think. And that's one of the things that we're achieving here today. So I'd like to open this up to questions on topic only. We're going to focus on why we came here today. If we take any questions, if there are any, we actually may have answered them all. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Congressman, after those initial remarks that became very controversial, you spoke at a town hall meeting where a woman who was a school teacher mentioned that she had had a 10-year-old student who was a product of incest and became pregnant. And you seemed to be shocked about such a story and thought that it was maybe the exception, and you said that you would have to look into it and see if that would affect your views. I'm wondering if you have done any research since then into the potential psychological and physical implications of a 10-year-old.
Well,
Real quick, can you please state your name and what outlet you're with?
Ray Kabasu, the Des Moines Register.
okay, thank you. That particular case is so local and so specific that if I were to illuminate it, I think that it gets too personal for the circumstances around her. So I'm not willing to discuss that publicly. It's kind of an outgrowth of HIPAA that I think that they deserve privacy on this issue, and it's a discussion that should take place privately. So Rebecca wanted to mention also.
But also, if I could just follow up on that, aside from that particular case, have you done any research into the consequences of, a 10-year-old or a very young child being forced to?
Some, but I'm not completed yet. Rebecca?
So I've done extensive research on this issue. I've been speaking for the last 24 years. I'm an attorney. I've litigated numerous high-profile cases defending women in life, including cases involving young mothers who became pregnant as a result of rape. The younger a girl is who's pregnant, the more likely it is that she's being raped by someone in the household or someone close in the family. And the more likely that it's been going on for years. And we know that oftentimes it is a girl's own mother who will take her to the abortion clinic in order to protect her boyfriend or husband or brother or some other family member. And the abortion destroys the evidence. We know that from exposés done by Live Action that abortion clinics regularly cover up the rape. If you do a search, like I said, I get Google notifications every single day on this issue. And so anytime we have a case that demonstrates this point, I do the hashtag rapists love abortion. And so if you literally search rapists love abortion, you will see case after case after case reported in the news where a girl was raped for years, continued to be raped after the abortion, because the abortion protected and enabled the perpetrator to continue perpetrating. What happens is that when a girl gives birth As she delivers the baby, that baby delivers her out of that abusive situation, because it is the baby who exposes what's being done and who finally protects her when oftentimes her own mother isn't.
Next question.
Congressman Scott Fetridge from.
One more thing I didn't mention, also the younger she is, the more likely she's very far in her pregnancy, where actually a late-term abortion would be quite dangerous. When you do the abortion, we call it the dismemberment abortion, literally you have shards of bone being exposed, and that, as you can imagine, would be quite dangerous to be ripping out of a girl's womb. And you're talking about a three-day procedure. They have to dilate her cervix, they have to put laminaries in, and it's not like, you know, the baby just vanishes into thin air like some people think. It's extremely traumatic to have to put a young girl through a late-term abortion like that. When you have a young girl, what you can deliver early. You know, we're not talking about making her go full term, but nowadays they deliver early when they have a young girl like that. And again, it's the baby who then protects her and delivers her out of that abusive situation.
Name and organization.
Scott McFetridge from the Associated Press. I just wanted to confirm that you stand by the quote that I think got some people unhappy with you, is one where you said, what if we went back through all the family trees and just pulled these people out that were products of rape and incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we did that? And I just wanted to make sure that you affirm that is what you said, and that you stand by that statement.
That sounds exactly like what I said. And I would point out that genealogists have contacted me and said that's 100% correct. I'd rather deliver that in a little softer way, though. And the softer way is this: most of us have seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And when you see that Jimmy Stewart as George Bailey, and he's talking to the angel Clarence, and he said, I wish I had never been born. And the angel said, that's a good idea. Let's go back and see what the world had been like if you'd have never been born. And he takes him to the gravestone of his brother who had been drowned, falling through the ice. He said, here's where your brother's buried. Well, it can't be true because he got a Medal of Honor for saving a troop ship. Well, no, he didn't. They all drowned too because your brother went through the ice and you were not born, so you weren't there to save his life. And they looked at the house and it was a shambles. And Donna Reed, who, by the way, happened to date my father-in-law for a while in Denison. She was this old maid that didn't live with the joy and the happiness of the children that they had. Just that little piece. So think what that means to all of us. And 1,000 generations. And think of how different the world is. So it was an objectively honest and accurate statement, but I think it was willfully misinterpreted. I care about all people, and I think we should look back in our family trees and wonder. That's what I want people to ask that question, because I see this sanctimonious attitude out there. People will say, well, there needs to be exceptions for rape and incest for whatever their humanistic argument is. And it is flippant sometimes, and it's insulting sometimes. And who among us can claim that we have virtue beyond that of Rebecca here today? None of us, is my point, none.
And to be clear, when he said if you take people out, he's referring to abortion, if you aborted them. Not, if there hadn't been raped. He was talking about abortion, clearly, in context. He was being asked about no exceptions and an abortion ban. So he was referring to abortion. He wasn't suggesting that rape was necessary, you wouldn't have these people. And so it's very unfair, the headlines that I've seen, where you're trying to twist what that meant. He was talking about abortion.
Any further questions? My sense is yes.
Sorry, I have another one. So the Trump administration recently halted Title X funds to clinics which mention the word abortion. And I'm wondering if this isn't counterproductive in your view, because the more clinics that provide birth control, pregnancy prevention measures to young women, the less the chance of abortion occurring. I'm wondering how you feel about that, and if you think that this is also an issue of free speech, to be able to talk about abortion when it is legal under the Supreme Court ruling.
Planned Parenthood made the decision that they would forego federal funding rather than stop aborting babies. I think that's the point out of all of this that the public needs to hear and think about. And it just says, it isn't about freedom of speech so much as it is that we can't compel taxpayers to fund organizations that advocate for abortion. It's a moral affront to the majority of the American people. And so that's a discretionary decision made by the president that I believe is supported by a majority of the United States Senate, and last year it would have easily been the majority of the United States House. I think that about wraps it up here today. I appreciate everybody being here today and the attention you paid. Rebecca, Tamara, Tim, and Tammy, all of you, I learned something standing here today, and I'm stronger walking off this stage than I was walking on it. Thank you all. God bless you.